Bring it on, bring it on. You, bring it on.
Life know the sweet though, eh? If some people know they hate you, so use the number 6 so and calculate. You go see the ratio. The beef self na me go, whether na asu.
I want to happily welcome all council delegates to this event. The NAIP and council members of NAIP, captains of industries here present, fellows of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. Welcome to this training session of this conference. Today we continue with our training session, and which is what we've just added to bridge the gap that has been observed and to enhance knowledge sharing within ourselves. And I want to take time to ask those of us who were here yesterday, do you think we should continue with this training during our conferences? So we were enhanced yesterday. We were improved yesterday. All right? Thank you for that feedback.
It's really great to be here to welcome you all to this very important session. This session is very critical, very important, and your presence means a lot. It shows commitment in advancing pharmacy practice and strengthening our world healthcare system. Today's session is both timely and critical. As pharmacists, we operate within a highly regulated environment where we must talk about professionalism, ethics, and compliance. These are not optional. They are not optional. They are necessary ingredients as far as our practice is concerned. They are fundamental to our practice and to the trust society reposed in us. You can imagine you formulate something, you give somebody, he takes willingly. That shows trust. And of course, the evolving landscape of pharmacy, especially the laws, coupled with the increasing expectations of regulatory bodies, are so high. That shows we have to continue to update our knowledge and align our operations with global best practice. Pharmacy is not a local profession, it's a global profession. Anywhere, all what it has, anywhere, it must be done in Nigeria. So today, we are privileged to have two seasoned professionals, gurus in their own field, who will give all the insights, will be able to guide us on what we are going to discuss this morning.
And let me start by welcoming you into the world of pharmacy jurisprudence. You know that the most supreme law in any country is the constitution of that country. And so in Nigeria, the most supreme document, if we are thinking of laws, remains the 1999 constitution. Oftentimes, this constitutional framework is bracketized into so many jurisdictional scopes. And so in Nigeria, you have three major levels. Items that are classified on the exclusive list, those classified on what is called the concurrent list, and those on the residual list. Now, if you find anybody talking about the exclusive list, the very first thing that comes to mind is that matters on the exclusive list are matters that have been structured for only the National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to legislate on. So, because it is only the federal government that has an ambit or a latitude of influence, then naturally it is only the executive arm of government through the various MDAs at federal level that can enforce laws enacted by the National Assembly. And then, in terms of adjudication, it's only the federal courts that have a jurisdiction to legislate on anything that is on the exclusive list. That is why today in Nigeria, because drug matters are listed as item 21 in part 2, item 21 in part 1 of the exclusive list, everything pertaining to drugs can only be handled at federal level. So it means it's only the National Assembly that can legislate on drugs. So it's the only one. If a state assembly does it, it is unlawful, it is illegitimate. It will be thrown out if it is challenged in the courts. It is only, that is why it is only agencies like PCL, NAFDAC, NDLA, because they are federal agencies. Those are the only ones that can regulate us. And of course, in terms of adjudication, if you're going to challenge anything PCN, NAFDAC, or any of these agencies, anything you pertain to an infringement, you can only challenge them in the Federal High Court. I hope you're following. Now, in similar spirit, a brand that is an agenda item has been on the concurrent list. It is the federal and the state governments that have a jurisdiction to legislate. If you remember, in 1979, for those of you who already followed as far back as that time, you remember that health matters, for instance, has always been listed on the concurrent list. That is why state governments, in addition to the federal government, can make laws at the level of NAS or state assemblies. That is why you discover that apart from pharmacy, most of the other health professions actually regulated at states level, either through a private hospital registration authority or what they call all sorts of designations. Don't let me waste too much time on that. And then if you say an item is on the concurrent list, the federal, state, and local governments have jurisdiction. Those of you who are retail pharmacists, you will observe that also in few instances, local government personnel come into your pharmacy to regulate, and the more serious ones will seize items like wine, supermarket items, detergent, and toiletry, and all of those things. The reason is because local governments actually have a jurisdiction to regulate such items. I hope you understand. So if you do not want their trouble or nuisance value, you have to really consider whether it is worthwhile touching such merchandise. But basically, I think you get the drift, so that you will understand a few things about the law as we go on. In Nigeria today, you also know that there are a plethora of laws. We have a plethora of laws. Some of those laws are called pharmacy laws. There are two in existence. Pharmacy laws are broad general laws. We also have drug laws. Drug laws are a little more specific. They are interventions. In Nigeria, the two pharmacy laws we have now, and as we go down, you get to see that law. The two pharmacy laws we have today are the Poison Pharmacy Act, 535, laws of the Federation 1990. And then you also have the recent PCN Act 2022 as amended.
I'll be taking us through preparing your facility, manufacturing, importation, wholesale for PCN approval. And I would like to start by way of preamble with some definitions. Approval. What is even approval? We said approval is the act of accepting, allowing, or agreeing to something, or the feeling that something is good and worthy. It signifies sanction, endorsement, or a positive opinion, often requiring authorization or validation. Then let's look at regulation. Regulation is an official law or ordinance designed to control or direct. It serves to manage risks, set industry standards, and control economic behavior through penalties and incentives. So I'm bringing out these definitions so that we can we can understand what regulatory approval is. So simply, I will just say regulatory approval is authorization backed by law. And that is what PCN gives or does. So my mentor has taken us through PCN laws. We all know what PCN, but for people that have never been to our head office, this is our beautiful head office in Abuja. Yes. And for those that are not aware that we have other offices, I want to tell you that we have 35 state offices, 8 zonal offices, and we have started opening satellite offices. So in places like Warri, Warri is far from Asaba. So we have a satellite office in Warri. Then we have one in Maraba Maraba is far from Lafia. So God's willing, as we get more resources, human and financial, we will keep making life easy for our stakeholders so that you don't have to be roaming and travel far to get what you need from us. Next. Yes, so having a background on approval and regulation, I want us now to look at approval by PCN. Approval by PCN is not different from other regulatory approvals globally. Globally, there is regulatory approval within the pharmaceutical sector of any country. So approval is synonymous to that regulatory approval of other countries. It covers training institutions, practitioners, and the pharmaceutical premises. And this is with the aim of ensuring compliance with established standards. So approval, for the end point of approval for PCN is licensure. The approval is the process. The bus stop is the license. Whether a new license or renewal of license. So all pharmaceutical premises in Nigeria must undergo the process of licensure. The process serves as the backbone for legal, safe, and commercial operations. The licensing ensures that entities across the pharmaceutical supply chain comply with extant rules to protect public health and maintain the quality and effectiveness of the products within the supply chain. Therefore, all pharmaceutical premises must be inspected, accredited, approved, registered before they are issued license. So now we're looking at the next one. Okay. What is even the importance of this PCN license? Why do I need to get PCN license or approval? We set for legal compliance and operational legitimacy. It is a mandatory authorization. You have to have license to be able to operate, to manufacture, import, or distribute medicine. It prevents penalties. Once you're licensed, you are free from penalties to an extent, because to an extent you have to comply with the laws and regulations. So you're free from penalties, sanctions, unless if you do otherwise, practice-wise in the premises. Controlled substances. We all know that you cannot handle controlled substances without license. 1, as a pharmacist, 2, as a registered facility. The product quality and safety assurance. Licensure ensures that you comply to regulatory standards. All the GMP, the GSDP, GPP, whatever. So once you're licensed, it means that you are complying with those standards. And because you're complying with those standards, the quality of the product, quality and safety of the product is assured. Public trust. I'm sure these days nobody wants to buy drugs from a place that is not registered. So once you're registered, you gain that public trust, your clients, other healthcare providers, and also boost the image of your company. But I still have one problem here. The law says your license should be conspicuously displayed in the premises. I can count how many premises we enter and you see their license displayed. I always ask them, why? You're a legal entity, don't you want anybody coming in to see that, yes, at least once I come in and see your license, that satisfaction, will just come in. So what does it take to display your license? You don't want to display the original copy? Display the colored photocopy of the license and keep your original copy somewhere.
So bring your own crayfish, we go mix, oh la. Shane and them talk say, we no go blow. Share them they see us now, we don't they glow. Take a look at me now, take a look at me now. We're running things in this town. Can't you see?
I don't care who you are, where you're from, or what you do. Just as long as you're chasing money, do what's right, never give up on it. Bring it on, bring it on.
Are you ready? Unu ready?
This is an overview. Basically, you see the QBD tool and then the scenario. Like if I ask you, what are the critical process parameters for a particular the drug that you have worked on? Do you have an example of what it should be? So what this slide is doing is if we look at the first one is risk assessment. So here the application or the scenario is what type of risks are you looking at? What is the challenge you have? So we will have the DO, which I think from the question I asked yesterday, I don't think any one of you have used design of experiment. But it is very key. But the main thing here is in doing your, let's use a simple HPLC or even your drug formulation. I used a soup yesterday. You should be able to define all your variables, all your factors that needs to be used. Because if you want to cook bitter leaf soup and you do not have the basic ingredients, you cannot expect it to taste the way you have eaten it from somewhere. So you list all your variables, which are the factors, and then use it to make sure that each of those variables are evaluated and interaction with each other as well as interaction with the other. And that will also go forward to the stability studies. So the stability studies is also part of the evaluation of how robust your process and your product is. And another thing we mentioned very importantly is drug formulation is not a standalone process. It must go in parallel with what? It must go in parallel with your analytical or your analytics. So as you're developing your drug, evaluating your excipients, you must have a tool, a method, an equipment that will tell you, yes, what I'm looking at is giving me some specific criteria, which is your critical quality attribute. Those things should be defined, and you have to, for you to be able to be sure those materials are giving you what they're supposed to be, is there has to be a test material. And remember, QBD is build quality into the product, not wait until the end, then you do a test. Test, trial and error. If you do that, the agency will throw you out. So if you are able, as you go along, your analytical method, even if it's not validated, but has to be able to qualify and give you some data as to tell you, go ahead. And I mentioned also the formulation scientist does the preliminary work, reviews all the materials, and then based on the control space, within the design space, the control space, you have the knowledge around. I know I didn't show that yesterday. You know what is a design space?
Multi-dimensional combination of variables.
Okay. In every, be it the formulation or the analytical tool, you must have evaluated all your testing processes until you get where it is now fixed. You know that if Mr. A uses that same method or process, they will get the same, they will get 99%. If person B uses the same process or criteria, let's say even HPLC, the mobile phase, the essence of the quality by design is that wherever your method is used, whether in Kenya, South Africa, everybody should be getting the same result because you have evaluated your processes, identified the materials, identified any of the challenges, and now decided I will be running my samples, my test, my mobile phase, my formulation in this region. And that region is your design space or your control space within the design space. And then for the analytical, it's called the main operating range within that circle. So those are basic things that are critical. The tools that can be used, I mentioned, is the QPD, which has, these are the principles or the philosophy of the QPD, and then some aspects of Six Sigma. So these two, and we talked about the different criteria. This one is easier to memorize. You know why? If you just remember demand, define, which is the same thing, principles of QBD is telling you, you have to have a predefined objectives. Everything has to be predefined. You don't just go and just start doing anything. If you have a development team or a manufacturing group, you must have sat down, everything decided before we start anything. And so, in the same thing with the Six Sigma, you define your goals, you must measure.
Let's ensure that marketing does not become a total cash and carry business. A total cash and carry business. Somebody has told me to use our product becomes a 2.5 million. And guess what? When I was told, I said that is not possible. So I organized a meeting with the get. And when I met him, he told me that I should be happy that he's asking me for this. This is not the way to do it. Are you not going to be recommending this product for somebody? Are you going to recommend it because I give you 100 million naira for? Or there is something in this product that will benefit your people? That is the environment. Who are in charge of marketing our product business. We must do some of that and don't get more from them. The pharmacists seek partnership support beyond supply. They don't just believe. They want to be sure that when they meet you, they want to be sure that when there are challenges, when there are issues, somebody they can call. So this is what pharmacists want. And for the patient, they expect affordability, positive outcomes, and not just finances. When we have this big problem, and when I say big problem, when our engagement done from up to 1,000, and most of the branded products are unaffordable. Why are people not going for it? The issue is cost. Despite the fact that the product was selling 4,000 naira before, become 1,000 naira, so people are still scraping their head over it. And that is where some of our professionals that we need as a group, not as an individual, need to go to market, public place, to let people know there are some other cheaper alternatives that we can guarantee we do the same job for us. So the shift now is from push base. We do it a lot. We use gift, we use incentive, we use a lot of things to push the product into the market. But when you keep on pushing, the time will come, the market will become saturated. And if you are not careful, you will come back. And come back to make this product. Now, we need to pull. And in pulling, we continue with some of our traditional model of detailing and here and there. But we need to build trust. and engagement. So the key takeaway here is without a data-driven effect, brand building becomes a guesswork. We said it before. I thank God some of the things I was working at yesterday. I recognize your presence. We have what we call pharmaceutical audit group in those days, which all companies will bring their figures and we will now come together. Those that bring their figures and real one that we have, we will now say, okay, if you real one of this amount, I told you before, the grade of black market will be. Thank God, there are some companies that are selling data, and the interesting thing is that this data are actually available to demand. Every time we report, we submit our document to NAIP. So from NAIP, we actually mine all the data to know how much of paracetamol is being sold, how much of anti-malaria is being sold, how much of antibiotics are being sold, and we can even have the different categories if we can mine the data. But thank God there are some companies that are doing right now. Now, customer insights happen to be the foundation of competitive advantage. You need to know who your target audience is, who are you looking for. But most of us don't want to use data. Why? Because they are expensive. And truly they are expensive. I pay about 5 million naira a year for me to get data on the products that are married. Why? Because they can show me who are the road driver, whether it's the physician or the pharmacist or direct consumer. I can see that. And I can see what is happening in big city, in Ibadan, in Kano, in Port Harcourt, in Enugu. So I can know where the rate is sitting. So I can know where to direct my direct promotion effort. So strong brand rely on data driven customer insight. For the Nigerian reality is that there is limited data use, there is reliance on feed information that we get.
And handle it, if inefficient, it is one small.
I think that we should go
See, when you're telling one target, don't provoke our. There's nothing like let it be short now. You are spoiling your place. What will you say? Back in the way so how to do this? I'm not the doctor. Yes.
Then the same time academia, like research.
Yes.
So those kind of things.
You have acknowledged it, but I know. Very intelligent. I can live with her.
In the sense that she's totally collaboration.
You like that?
She's not
calling that kind of.
If you're able to collaborate, because let's see the pharma industry, all these people on the table, there's
to position your product.
Like she said, people that are so then there has to be a collaboration. There's a collaboration that's actually this. There's very important. Okay, the last question is formulation science is a foundation. But where is the skills gap?
To come and go over there. Because not very few companies want to
just the curriculum.
because they have one of the greatest
Do we make the industry that they're not showing enough? How do we blame the industry?
There are
So,
want cheap
what
products.
are your thoughts?
They want cheap products. No matter the value you are bringing, they want cheap products. And you cannot change them. And then, if I use it, I don't want to double the dose.
Skills gap.
And you're looking at his face.
across the
Feeling
there
guilty.
are some areas
That when you double the dose, you double the size.
where is that?
Yes, now.
But now we say that
It's
this
a challenging situation. And when you pass it,
this is actually
yeah,
because this thing we have this
and you will overcome it. If you have less,
we just
what have you done? You should identify the competent program in use and they know it. When you were doing your prayer planning, directly asking the doctor to know the name of the program. Doctor, they follow to tell you. They do. Some of them do. They tell you. Next. Second, analyze the community. Good. Don't open the doctor by asking, using open questions and then question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the following.
That's what
She really is an expert in her field, and as she said,
for other areas.
so we also appreciate her
Entrance gates.
for reaching out to her. Some of those questions are very
Express your product advantage
something to digest and direct.
when you have strength.
So with that, I think
And finish over the bottom and acquire the doctor opinion. Support this step with more benefits and then ask for action to switch the position or to switch the customer over to next. Yeah, good. Fully detailed knowledge about the company is essential. You know, yesterday we were talking about in the market, what you are doing, the products, the customer you are selling, and profit. That is the environment you are dealing with. So, if you have your product, please get as much information as much as possible of the competing brands. Otherwise, they will take the market over. And in the beginning, every time you go to the excuse. I said, yeah, yesterday somebody was, I don't know what you do today. If you are not bringing value to your company, what is the value? If you are not selling enough, and then they give you a target of failing the target. Yesterday, about 60 days and 19 days. 60 to 90 days I have that. Most companies are not doing that. We are not doing it because we are sympathetic. We are baptized with these people. But I see that some companies are quite rigid, and if you fail to deliver, they are not even talking about it. It doesn't mean quarter. 1 quarter is 90 days. So I was just thinking, how can I access it to give it 1 quarter? And we face the one, I feel somehow. And what I do is, but you can see, we had it yesterday with confidence. And so you really supported your target of budget. January, February, March, and April, maybe let's say 180 days. That would be too much. And the company will remind you. And when they say go, say it's a wicked man. What is wicked about?
Intelligence without narrative is what? Just data. So market intelligence, when you just know what is going on, you want to understand let me say the demand market now. And all you know is this English I've spoken. Or not even, let me say, you have data, there are 26 DMAs, they have this, they do this, it's limited. What is informing the DMAs? What exactly is the DMAs? What are they doing? What made them the thing we need to look at? So intelligence without the narrative, the backbone, like we said, the architectural framework is just what? Data. And data can't help anybody much. Now the other, it said narrative without intelligence. Having everything, but you don't have the what? The data. It's just what? Noise. And those are the two things we must make sure that we do. So now, if we are going into this is what we should have ended with yesterday. just to make sure that we understand the market intelligence, we understand how to look at the market, that is my demand and my supply market. You always be in the middle. I need to know my demand, I need to have better information. Even if you are working, you can make yourself indispensable in any company if you spend a little bit more time understanding the demand market. If today you don't know what a DMA, how a DMA functions, which DMA should you do business with? Not just on the sales volume. There are DMAs, just one shake. Some of you did business with Gandu. During Gandu time back, there was something that happened. For 4 years, they were owing you. Do you know why? Have you tried to understand why did they owe us? Sorry, they were still doing business with you, but they were owing you, and they could not pay you that money. It's now that they are what? Paying. They've been paying. And that's the kind of information you should have. And then that will make you know what is the impact of election on a game. There is a big impact of election on DRF. For some of you that do business with DRF, that is not a DMA. Very risky. And also there's a huge impact on federal government initiatives. How many people remember PTF? Yeah. There's a big impact. How do you understand that to protect your company? To explain to them, this is why anything federal is doing versus anything a state that does not have a DRF and all of a sudden they say they are doing massive procurement, or anything a DMA is doing. That's understanding your market. And that's why what happens in companies, when they do it's sweet, and most times when it's sweet, they will not tell anybody. They'll be it's then something will happen. Their money will pepper them. It's gold. And then they say, I will never do business with government. It will take 10 years for the company to what? Recover. And these are things you can look at. You can understand that market to say, why? Which one is less risky? But to say you would do business with a government institution and you just begin with this tertiary hospital, you will just be playing with institutional pricing. They will just be using you to do what they call that thing. Other people's what? They use your money. They owe you, and when they owe you, they use your money. They'll be revolving. The revolving is actually you. They revolve. So we now know that, and of course, the competency map says what competency do we need in this market. And I mentioned 3 key competency. We need is what? The first one. What competency do you need in this market? Market intelligence. What? 2. Okay, 3. Political navigation. Political navigation is what I was trying to explain. Now, what happened in Kano? Because they met with me and they said, you need to come and help us. You need to come and... When they finished, I said, nobody can help you. You need to wait out that election. There's something that will happen, you wait that. So what happened in Kano was what we call the airtight DMA. Now, DMA is set up in such a way that you can shake it, but it will be hard to break it. Because it is guided by law, like what we were taught yesterday, the rule of law is very important. It is guided by law that says that for money to move out of the DMA, you need approval from the board, not from the government. Every DMA has a board. Of course, one of the key things that I will show you now is there is a new partnership you need to look at, and that's what some companies are leveraging in the market. If you're here and the DMA is a partnership between DMA and what? Suppliers. It's very important in the new marketplace. Why? How many DMAs do we have now in the country? 20, I think it's 27. I heard Cross River just set up it. I think it's up to 27. By the end of this year, there should be 30. So, how many of you know DMAs? How many of you, apart from buying from them, know how they operate? What are the key features of a DMA? What makes it different from a DRF? from a central medical store. Since you want to understand the market, because that's what I want us to understand. If you are going to make a transformational change in your company this year, if you feel the reason why they are not paying you what you feel you deserve, and maybe you should think of new skills now. Because if it's just by sales, there's a cap to what sales can do.
So of course we talk about these, quality is free, but really the question is really quality free? But I would say only if you manage to do it right the first time. So really you need to invest time and effort to understand organization dynamics and organization culture. I believe that culture change. But first you have to understand you don't really see. What we see mostly in terms of what we think about quality cost is really the cost of poor quality, recalls, rework, returns from the customer. But underneath that borderline, there's a whole series of costs that, such as lost sales, such as an unplanned downtime, such as time spent with unhappy customers. That's really, you don't see it visibly, but it's a huge level of cost. So based on Albert Einstein, really, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So let's take a look. So the total cost of quality, if you look at this next slide 8, measuring and managing total cost of quality is not simple. You really have to create what are the key category of costs and then start to act on the top 3. So really what you have to think about is, the US 2026 survey, now I'm on the next slide, CEO survey leading to quality, cost of poor quality. So number 1, cost of poor quality, according to US CEOs, is actually lost sales and lost reputation. Second is operational inefficiency. Third is that data and AI innovators, that's a new one. In this age of AI, use generative and agentic AI, and your failure to use it effectively can cost you money. And finally, unplanned downtime and regulatory compliance issues. So how do you build a sustainable quality? First, you start by building your capability, your organization capability. And I think of it as 3 buckets. Number 1 is your facility, product mix, process, equipment, technology, capacity, and complexity in your organization. Is it fit for purpose? So you don't build a aseptic facility to manage solid dosage form, or you don't make aseptic products in a uncontrolled environment. So really fit for purpose is critical. The starting point, that's infrastructure, that's your investment to begin with. Secondly, you have to build a very robust quality system, not only in paper, but really when used, make good decisions. And then you have to engage employees and to enable them. Finally, you have to, on an ongoing operation, you really have to make sure you drive governance. You put governance process. Governance is about management controls, management oversight, management information, and using information to make good adjustments to your decision. That's what governance is all about. It's like a contraption, a railroad, to prevent the car from going off track. Finally, all of this come together and envelope in your culture. Culture is invisible, but you see it everywhere. So what is culture? So we're going to go on the next slide. Understanding total cost of quality really is the challenges you don't really can count all of them according to Einstein. And those that counted that you normally look at, that may not count. So really what we have to do is thinking about what is the total cost of quality. I say it is 3 buckets. Number 1 is cost of conformance, which is prevention cost and appraisal cost. And finally, cost of non-conformance, which is internal and external failure cost. Okay, so coming back, really you look at the visible and invisible cost. You look at prevention, appraisal, and failure. I'm on the slide, strategic shift, change, failure, appraisal, prevention, cost ratio. So on year 1, you may be measuring your failure cost maybe 60%. Your appraisal cost may be 30%, okay, and your prevention costs, you're not proactive to invest in prevention in year 1. But once you start to do Pareto it out, understanding what the failure cost is, what is the appraisal cost is, and what the prevention cost is, you can start to invest in more prevention. And then increase your appraisal, but you can drive down your failure costs. And on year 3, you might be able to get to the point where failure costs are now down to 40%, and prevention appraisal is now the majority of your costs, which is a good thing. Okay, so 40, 40, 30.
Case studies in WHO pre-qualification as a pathway for Nigeria and Africa to compete in the global market. Until you are able to do that, you cannot compete globally. It doesn't matter what you do. Voodoo will not do it. Mago will not do it. But pure science, remember, quality by design is systematically predefining your process or your objective and doing everything methodically with understanding. So, and eventually we'll have your supply chain. Remember, supply chain is one of the biggest problems you have in the pharmaceutical industry. We all saw what happened during the COVID. So please, Toby, push. Okay. So the roadmap of this presentation, we're going to look at the crisis, and who can tell me what the crisis is? Okay. Most of our products are imports. Everything is imported. And in fact, sometimes I complain, why should Indians? We are importing everything from India. Simple medication, simple excipients, everything. And then the science, the drug formulation principle, do you understand it? And that's why we started yesterday. And then we are going to look at the case study 1, 2, 3, 4. The Swiffer in Nigeria, they are the best people in Nigeria to be able to successfully defend be able to pass the pre-qualification. So the other one is from Kenya, the ENZO as well, and then the recommendation from the manufacturers as well as NAFDAC is the main regulatory agency for this country. And of course, all the regulatory agencies in the globe, in the world, they follow the same, basically the same principles. Okay, push. So, the diagnosis here is Nigeria's medicines are imported. Everything is imported. And because of the import, we spend money. Not only do we spend money, maybe the things we're importing are not even good. So, to be able to stop that importation is to be able to do things by ourselves. And doing things by ourselves is, please, I'll be singing this like a song. Make sure your quality by design approach or principles, you understand it. If there's nothing else you took away from this conference, just know that for you to be a successful pharmacist or pharmaceutical scientist that is helping to produce drugs for Nigeria and for Africa as a whole, is because you understand what you need to do. And then you can see that 80 to 88% of Africa's farmer needs importation. And so we are trying to see the basis for doing what we are trying to understand in this conference is to be able to change all those dynamics. Just switch over and make our own and be able to defend it. What I want you to see here, I think it was done by the chairman actually. He says no serious nation outsources its survival strategy. That is a very big indictment, and it is real. If you want to be a nation that people will take you seriously, so that we can compete, you should be able to do not outsource, just do things by yourself, because you have everything God has given you to be successful. Okay, so why does understanding what you're supposed to do matter? We remember what happened during COVID. There were shortages because we have to depend on somewhere. But even if Nigeria has, even going from the local hub or whatever, but most of the things depend on us. There are other countries that we are dependent, but as a giant of Africa, we should not be dependent on importation. So the cost of importation is very high. And if you start importing, you are at their mercy. So whatever you